I have 7 o'clock, so if you'd all join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, we'll get started. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone. This evening, Board of Education is recognizing an outstanding group of Parkway students. But first, tonight we're introducing a new Parkway Award, the Superintendent Character Award. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Keith Marty, our superintendent, to share some details about this new award.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our board meeting. And as Mr. Todd said, over the years, I've had the pleasure to present special awards from time to time to students. But tonight we're initiating a new recognition, and we'll have some recipients. Dr. H in a moment will do the honors. But we're establishing what we're calling a Superintendent Character Award. And I want to be clear that the superintendent is going to be the only one that's going to be involved in this. We have a number of people who will make recommendations, and we'll certainly do this formally at board meetings. But the Superintendent Character Award, we believe, is an opportunity for us, since we are a district that has, we're a district school of character, where we have many of our schools that are schools, national, state and national schools of character. It gives us the opportunity really to point out and signify some students who really deserve this award. So what we're going to do is, again, in a few moments, recognize the first of these recipients. But let me tell you what some of the characteristics or some of the criteria are. We're going to recognize over time those that exemplify character and resilience in the face of significant adversary or personal challenges. Those that have present personal courage that is demonstrated. Those that put the well-being of others ahead of their own needs. Significant sacrifice of time, energy, and effort for the betterment of the community. And an example of the highest level of integrity and honesty demonstrated. Again, these we believe are criteria that you're going to see in a moment was demonstrated by some students recently, but that we believe deserve recognition when that is noted. And we believe that we have in Parkway some wonderful, wonderful young people. But we also want to recognize those in the community that might, from time to exemplify this, that could be models, as well as our staff members. But this won't be restricted to students. But tonight, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. H to present this first award to students from South High School. Dr. H.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It is so good to be here tonight to share with you the wonderful things that our students have done in the past few weeks. And you may have seen this on the news, but we're still so happy to formally recognize them for just all they gave on this day. So the road rage incident, which resulted in one person running over another twice, and then an attempt at a third time, would stun anyone. It would cause, maybe paralyzing pause for anyone as well. But not for the three students that we have here tonight, our outstanding members of Parkway South High School, who are responsive and caring. These young people, there's so many words that you could use, but we'd be here all night. I'd go on and on, right? So it was remarkable what they did, and we're going to see a video in a minute. Parkway South is so very proud of the quick and level-headed response that our students demonstrated in the face of danger, but also in the face of human need. Please, at this time, let's go ahead and show that video.
Details coming out tonight about a road rage incident boiling over in a school parking lot. Two grandfathers squared off, forcing some West County teens to spring into action.
I watched him kind of speed up a little bit and run him over, and I heard a crunch.
The man in the vehicle ran him over once and then drove around the parking lot for a second time.
And they say this man would have done it a third time if they didn't step in. News 4's Caroline Hecker is at Parkway South in Manchester, where this road rage story took this dangerous turn. Caroline?
Well, Corey, this road rage incident actually started on Manchester, about a mile away, when police say the victim cut the suspect off. But it ended very violently here in the school parking lot. Jose Vasquez says he was walking to his car after school when something strange caught his eye. Two elderly men arguing, one inside his car, the other recording outside of it.
I yelled repeatedly, "Stop, sir, stop, get away from each other," stuff like that. And it then led to them separated for quite, I would say, like a couple seconds.
But it quickly escalated into something far more deadly.
And the man in the vehicle ran him over once, and then drove around the parking lot for a second time, completely over his ribs, and was going to do so a third time until me and his wife jumped into action and stopped the car.
Moments before, senior Jalea Connor was about to leave the parking lot when she saw Jose and the two men yelling.
I heard like arguments and everything like that. I didn't want to get involved at all. Because it's not my business. I don't know what's going on.
But she waited as her mom called 911 in the car, unsure of what would happen next.
And then that's when I watched him kind of speed up a little bit and run him over. And I heard a crunch. And that's when I was like, yeah, I gotta get involved.
She rushed to the 72-year-old victim, unable to move, suffering from broken ribs and a shattered pelvis. A lifeguard and trained in CPR, she stayed with the man.
He kept it hidden, but he was terrified. He didn't want to open his eyes, wanted to keep his eyes closed. Told him he couldn't do that. And just like held on to me and Jose's hand the entire time.
Now, 73-year-old Michael Gallagher is charged with first-degree assault, armed criminal action, and second-degree robbery. He's currently being held on no bond.
And if it was not but for them, I really believe this man could have been much more seriously injured, if not killed.
Both students say they're still processing what they witnessed in their school parking lot.
I did not think he was going to run over him a second time at all. It was unbelievable that I even saw him go around the parking lot just like to get momentum to run him over for the second time.
Now, police say after Jose and the victim's wife stood in front of Gallagher to prevent him from running over that victim the third time, that Gallagher then got out of his car and wrestled the victim's wife's cell phone out of her hand before driving away. Police say if you're being followed and you suspect it's because of road rage, the best thing you can do is drive to a police department. If you don't know where that is, call 911 and the officer will find you, because while getting a license plate can be helpful, it is certainly not worth your life. We're live in Manchester tonight. Caroline Hecker, News 4.
Yeah,
Thank you. Quite an amazing event, really. So at this time, what I'd like to do is call Mrs. Pappas Moiko. She's an assistant principal at South High, up to the podium so she can help hand out the awards. And we actually had 3 students involved, even though we only had 2 students in the video that you just saw. So let me first introduce Daniel Ventura. Please come on up. Daniel. So with all of this happening, Daniel ran to get help. He came into the office, and I'm thinking, what is going on outside? But he let us know what was going on so we could get out there as well. So thank you very much, Daniel, for your bravery. Next, I would like to introduce Jalea Connor. Jalea is the person who jumped in to apply her CPR knowledge, or not, I'm sorry, CPR, her first aid knowledge to our gentleman who was hurt. So thank you. Congratulations. And Julia's mom is here too. She called 911, so I do want to give her that recognition. I mean, I'm sure that was a little unnerving, to let your child out of the car with all of this going on. So we thank you for that. And then also I would like to definitely introduce Jose Vasquez. Come on, Jose. There you go. Jose called for peace, and he did a couple other things, preventing the driver from running over that person a third time, and also helped to protect the wife. And so I, again, cannot express just how proud and amazed. And, these students, You can see this is getting to me. Because I can tell you this, and maybe I'm sure the parents feel this too, anything could have happened to the kids when they were out there. Yet they chose to jump in and take action right away. And I can tell you, I can't be any more proud of them. They're just wonderful. So thank you for the recognition tonight, and have a good evening.
Amazing indeed. Next, please welcome Mike Roth, our Director of Athletics and Activities, to introduce the state sports champions from West High.
Thank you. On behalf of the Board of Education and Dr. Morty, it's my honor and privilege as the Director of Athletics and Activities for Parkway to introduce our state champions for the fall season. Tonight, we are recognizing members from our Parkway West boys swimming and diving team. So now to our state champions. If I can have all four come up to the front right now, please. As you can see, we have four members here. So our first state championship was won in the 200-yard medley relay with a time of 1:36.29. So we have, when I call your names, you guys just give us a little wave, please. First, a sophomore, Daniel Budeman. Congratulations, Daniel. Senior, Raymond Yu. Another senior, Joshua Wu. And our final senior, Will Bonnet. Congratulations. Please stay pat. Next, we also have another state champion, Will Bonnet right here. Will's a senior. Will won a second state title this year in the 200-yard IM with a time of 1:48.91, setting a new Parkway West school record. So congratulations. And another state title by our senior, Will Bonnet again, this time in the 100-yard breaststroke with a time of 54.27, setting a new Misha Class 1 state record, fastest in Class 1. Congratulations. Will obviously is a very accomplished swimmer, as all the young men are. Will finished his West swimming career with 8 out of a possible 12 school records for the Longhorns. West has a very storied swimming program with 11 state titles on the boys' side, 13 state titles on the girls' side, finishing a very close second this year. Our head coach is Colleen Sumner. Colleen, come on up. Colleen was assisted this year by Ellen Lundstrom and Jenna Olson. In closing, not only are we proud of our state champions for their accomplishments, but we're accomplishments in the pool, but so proud of them for being great leaders in your school at Parkway West. Good luck to our seniors next year in college. We wish you the best. I'd also like to recognize our state champion parents. So parents, if you're in the crowd, please stand. Thank you so much for all you do. I know in swimming throughout the year, as these guys can attest, probably many, many early morning trips to the pool throughout the years. So congratulations to our guys. Congratulations to our parents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I think it's safe to say that we probably all have heroes in our lives of one type or another. I think we've seen some amazing heroes tonight, both that preserve the life and safety of strangers, heroes to the community in their schools, and we have so many heroes in our classrooms, both in teachers and students that stand up for each other. And I'm just really moved that we have people like that make a difference in our community. So you all should be very proud of your students, and students, you should be proud of yourselves. So thank you all for coming tonight, and we'll have a quick pause if any of you want to depart before we continue on the regular portion of our meeting. So. Next up is 7.0, which is 7.01, addendum to agenda item 11.08, which is the approval of personnel items. Next up, we have public comments. Tonight we have 17 people, I believe, signed up for citizen statements. And it's during this time that we provide an opportunity in an effort to maintain an open and respectful dialogue with our community. The public comment session is not the appropriate forum for addressing individually identifiable student and/or personnel matters. Therefore, due to privacy laws protecting students and employees, comments about these matters should not include personally identifiable information about particular students or employees. Members of the public, staff, and students are encouraged to utilize established policies and procedures for offering suggestions or addressing concerns and complaints prior to bringing the issue before the board. Please be mindful that the meetings of the board, including your statements here at the podium, are broadcast and that you are responsible for any public comments you make. In lieu of a public statement, you may choose to submit your comments to the board in writing. Also, due to the time constraints and the need to complete the primary responsibilities of our meeting agenda, we cannot respond during the meeting, so you will receive a response from us in writing. We're always available to have an open dialogue outside of our meeting and can be reached by email or phone using the contact information on the Parkway website. Again, as I mentioned, we have 17 speakers, so we'll probably exceed the time that we normally allow for public comment, but that's okay. Tonight, each speaker will have 2 minutes to come to the podium and share their thoughts with us. I'll call on you in the order that you've signed up. I would ask that you state your name and your relationship or affiliation to or with Parkway. And I would also ask that we refrain from applauding in between speakers so we can continue moving right through the list. I will do my best to pronounce your name. My apologies in advance if I am not successful, but please feel free to correct me. And I will try and call several people at a time so you know where you are on the list. So we will begin with Lowry Stephen Johnson, followed by Timothy Hunt, Lisa Ryan, and Larry Opinski.
Hello. Despite my legal name, my name is Dr. Stephen Johnson. My partner and I have 2 children currently in the Parkway West school system. I have a doctorate in genetics and about a decade of work in virus discovery and pathology. My partner has 15 years experience working in public health here in St. Louis. We strongly urge the board to reject the current proposal removing mask requirements. What is being proposed is the wrong path. This is not in alignment with this week's Department of Public Health's warning due to the significant increases in community transmission and hospitalizations. This even before the impact of the Omicron variant and the incoming flu season have been felt by our community. I recognize that this board has been under assault from mindless political grandstanding and a vocal anti-science minority. However, leadership comes first with responsibility to the community that allows you to lead. Voting in favor of this proposal sends the wrong message to our children and the silent majority of voters who are watching the choices you are making today. Thank you.
Next up is Timothy Hunt.
I'm Timothy Hunt, a parent. I've already emailed the board with the extreme details of my concerns about the proposed pandemic response plan. I have copies if anyone would like one. In light of the news today that we've reached a milestone of 800,000 deaths in the USA because of COVID, and St. Louis County is reporting that the most weekly COVID cases, pediatric cases since November 2020, and the St. Louis Metropolitan Pandemic Task Force is reporting that hospitalizations have more than doubled in the last month. I would like to reiterate my requests already made to the board for the modifications to the proposed plan. Firstly, the Board of Education should keep a mask mandate in place until such time as it is truly no longer needed by voting to keep the plan that is in place today. As I understand it, the current plan has been enacted by the administration directly, and the board's approval would remove any doubt as to the authority of that plan. If that is not possible, then I would like to see the proposed new plan modified to allow more time for staff and students to become fully vaccinated to meet the stated aim of that provision, to have any dates enacting changes to be shortly after the board plans to meet rather than shortly before, to give an opportunity for the board to review and possibly update those changes before enacted. That way we don't end up with policy changes multiple times in rapid succession, which would potentially increase risk and cause confusion. To modify the definition of an outbreak to be 1% positivity rate, minimum 2 individuals at each building, and that should include staff as well as students. To exclude staff and students who come into close contact with positive cases in accordance with CDC guidelines, and to include a provision to keep mask mandates in place while the St. Louis County positivity rate is above 7%, to reduce the risk of wider community spread being introduced into our schools. I want this pandemic to end soon and for our children to be kept as safe as possible while it continues. I trust that you truly want these things too, and therefore will do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Lisa Ryan. I'm sorry, Dr. Lisa Ryan.
My name's Lisa Ryan. I'm a Parkway parent and a pediatrician, and I'm extremely disappointed in the pandemic response plan being discussed tonight. These plans fly in the face of science and reason and instead reek of politics, fear, and exhaustion. St. Louis County is currently considered high risk for COVID spread with a 10.3% test positivity rate and an upward trajectory. The Pandemic Task Force warned today we are on a dangerous slope, likely resulting in record high infections and hospitalizations. The Department of Public Health just released a report detailing 551 pediatric cases of COVID during the first week of December. This is the highest number since November of last year. We shouldn't even be considering changes to school policies until our community is consistently in a low-risk zone with decreasing cases. We also must consider the new Omicron variant. Studies show Omicron is 3 times more contagious than Delta, and we all remember the outbreaks at the beginning of the school year that Delta caused. COVID vaccines are readily available. Vaccines are safe and present the only way of providing consistent immunity to the virus. Prior infection is not protective against Omicron. Studies show reinfection rates 3 to 8 times higher with Omicron as opposed to Delta. High student vaccine rates are necessary before changing mitigation protocols. Parkway's current plan has kept our schools open. Our students are active in plays, sporting events, and concerts. The low rates of infection result in children who feel safe at school. A key facet of good mental health is feeling safe and secure. This is necessary for everyone within our buildings. Feeling safe at school is crucial to preventing anxiety and depression. Upon hearing that his school would be mask optional next month, my 10-year-old son said that he will continue to wear his mask, but will feel very uncomfortable around unmasked classmates. Just like that, school is no longer a safe place for him. Parkway must continue to protect our students, teachers, and the community by maintaining mitigation measures until the numbers and science, not the politicians, tell us otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Larry Opinski. He'll be followed by Ashlyn Gavornik, James Taylor, and Ryan Wharton.
Thank you to the elected members of the Parkway Board of Education, Superintendent Marty, and the dedicated staff and volunteers of the Parkway School District for this opportunity to speak tonight. I stand before you as a Parkway graduate, a resident taxpayer, a proud parent of both a Parkway student and a Parkway alumni, and a longtime volunteer in the district on Project Parkway Steering Committee, the PACCD, and countless committees at schools. I do not agree with the change in the masking policy that is being proposed. As a public school district, Parkway is responsible for educating all children, as referenced in the mission statement. This policy will prevent all children from being educated in the classroom by placing the most vulnerable students in peril. I'm talking about children with disabilities and their families. The federal law governing education of children with disabilities in the public school system, the IDEA, clearly states that children must be provided a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. With the current precautions of masking, this enables all children to attend classes in person and meet that provision. The new policy will force parents of children with disabilities to choose between their children's health and their public education. That's not right. Furthermore, by changing this policy and forcing students with disability to stay home due to preserving their health and safety, you are potentially violating your fiduciary responsibilities to the district. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act Title II of the ADA protects from discrimination in state and local government entities. Disability discrimination includes the failure to make reasonable modifications in policies and practices. I have a 22-year-old Parkway graduate with a disability at home. I have an 18-year-old senior that, while attending school under the proposed policy, will have a far greater chance of being exposed to COVID and bringing it into our home. I want to respectfully request that each member of this board hold up your end of the elected official bargain and you vote to protect students, community, and our district by continuing to keep the mask mandate in place. This is not and should not be a political decision. This is about lives and responsibilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Ashlyn Gavornik.
Hello. As a student at Parkway South High School, I strongly disagree with the proposal to remove masks in school. It is the district's responsibility to keep me as a student feeling safe and respected in my learning environment. Even if this proposal goes through, I will continue my mask wearing, but I fear my safety around other students who remove their masks. I fear I will not be able to continue my focus in the school environment where I'm surrounded by people and constantly worried about my safety. I am also worried that if this proposal goes through and COVID cases continue to rise in our school district and area, as they are right now, we will be forced to look at the possibility of virtual school again. I am a very responsible student who is active in a lot of stuff, and virtual school hurt my GPA and chances of going places I want to go in the future because I was not able to continue my focus online. So I'd appreciate it if the school would continue with our current masking policy. That way I feel safe and am less worried about the transmission and can continue to focus on my education. As we've had many doctors and people say who are way more qualified than I am in this subject, the current cases in schools are rising, and our current St. Louis cases are rising in students. And continuing to mask would protect me as a student from this. If I am around people without masks, Parkway cannot guarantee my safety as a student and my continuation of learning. So I'd appreciate if the district rejects tonight's mask proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is James Taylor.
Dr. Marty and distinguished board members, as a father of 3 children attending Parkway schools and also a scientist, I respectfully disagree with the decision to stop requiring masks in January of 2022. Even with the mask mandate, my oldest daughter received 5 different COVID exposure notices this semester. And recent history shows that COVID cases spike over the winter and only begin to recede in the springtime. As of today, all of my family are vaccinated. However, even with vaccination, the latest evidence from South Africa shows that the vaccine is only 30% effective at preventing infection from the Omicron variant. Masks are a proven method of reducing infection from COVID, but they are most effective when everyone wears them. I'm concerned that without a mandate, community spread will increase at a critical time when hospitals are already full. For some in our towns, this could be a life or death matter. In addition to preventing community spread, I'm concerned that spread among teachers, staff, and students will further disrupt the school year. Masks have reduced student and teacher absences and allowed in-person learning to be successful again. Without them, I fear that more absences will occur, and students who are already struggling may lag further behind. As a scientist, I'm also skeptical that re-implementing masks when 2% of the school has COVID will prevent spread. Reporting of positive COVID tests have been up to a week later than the actual exposures. With a 2-week gestation period of the virus, by the time the mask mandate goes back in effect, it'll be too late to prevent spread. There's too much of a lag effect to make this policy effective. I understand the legal challenges to the mask mandate are concerning, but I would encourage considering making masks as part of a dress code, at least until springtime. I respect the rule of law and personal freedom, but thousands of kids without masks at school will lead to more hospitalizations and possibly death. The right thing to do is to protect the district by keeping the mandate until spring. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Ryan Wharton. He'll be followed by Wayne Hartman, Ryan Kerr, and Ashley West.
Good evening. My name is Ryan Wharton, and I am currently a senior at Parkway West High School. I want to raise the issue of masks in schools. I personally think that masks are not needed in our schools. I think they can be optional or recommended, but I don't think that they need to be required. I personally do not think that masks are effective. Now that we have the vaccine and people are getting the vaccine, why do we need to have the mask to protect us from a virus that the vaccine does that, the vaccine protects us from? We have people in our schools that are vaccinated and have a much less chance of getting COVID and or giving it to people. I understand that masks are used mostly to stop us from giving it to other people, but if both of the person that may be transmitting it and the person that may be getting it are vaccinated, then they both have a low chance. If someone chooses not to get the vaccine, that's their choice. And even if they give germs to someone who is vaccinated, they have a small chance of getting sick and getting very harsh symptoms from it. I understand that people in our schools may not be able to get vaccinated. However, it's a small number that the majority of us shouldn't be stuck wearing masks because of it. The new variant of COVID, Omicron, is spreading. The symptoms have been shown to be very mild. Symptoms such as sinuses, headaches, and achiness are all symptoms that you get with the flu or a simple head cold. We've never worn masks before when it came to protecting against the flu. We've built up immunity over time, and that's what we need to do with COVID-19. We've never worn masks just because of the flu, and I don't see why we need to do it with a virus with the same symptoms as the flu. Dr. Marty and school board members, I really encourage you to take a look at the current mandates in place. According to our own Attorney General, it's not right for you to force us to mask up. I'm not saying that nobody can wear a mask. I support everyone making the right decisions for themselves. If someone chooses to wear a mask, there's no shame in that. But I personally think that it should be optional. Thank you.
Next up is Wayne Hartman. Okay, thank you. Next up is Ryan Kerr.
Good evening. Tonight I want to speak to you about data, because data matters. You hear a lot of generalizations tonight. The generalizations don't come with data. You hear scientists, you hear physicians, but you don't hear data. Why? Well, this time last year, we were at 88.1 per 100,000 kids with cases, or actually 109.9. Currently, we are at 88.1. Last year, this time, we were at 222.6 for our middle school kids. Now we're at 142.1. Last year at this time, we were 313.2. We're now 144.1. The death rate has not changed. It's considered suppressed. There's a reason for that. It doesn't affect children like it does adults. The other issue, it doesn't matter whether you wear a mask or not in school if you're not wearing the proper mask and you're not wearing it properly. If we're going to allow fabric masks in school and we're going to hand out Hanes masks that clearly state on the package that they do absolutely nothing for transmission, why are we giving these to kids? Why? I was here 3 months ago. Somebody wanted to bring up full hospitals. 3 months ago, we were sitting at about 190 people in ICUs from COVID. Currently, that's under 100. We're using 10.7% of ICU space for COVID patients in St. Louis metro region. That's from your pandemic task force and the CDC. There's no reason for that. Also, there's 69,546 breakthrough cases in fully vaccinated individuals in Missouri, with 738 deaths. A whopping 301 reinfected from original infection. Now, there's a physician that said that there was no protection from original infection with Omicron. What's interesting is I'd like to see that data because that data doesn't exist. The data doesn't exist because those studies aren't done yet. The study started about 3 weeks ago. They won't conclude for another 6 weeks.
Thank you. Next up is Ashley West. She'll be followed by Trish Reynolds, Amy Schur, and Thalia Stein.
Hi, my name is Ashley West, and I am a senior at Parkway West. According to the most recent plan sent out by Dr. Marty, it says the district is required to provide a safe learning environment for all, including those with disabilities. It goes to say some classrooms may require masks depending on health and safety of students and staff. Well, I'm hard of hearing, and I wear hearing aids. Being hard of hearing is considered a disability. I cannot hear my teachers and peers when they are masked up. I cannot see facial expressions which is crucial for me in understanding what is being said and taught. Where is the concern for students like me? Students, teachers, staff, everyone over the age of 5 has the vaccine available to them. There is zero reason to wait another month to unmask us. Thank you.
Next up is Trish Reynolds.
Good evening. I'm speaking as a Parkway parent tonight, and I was disappointed to read Dr. Marty's most recent health and safety update, stating that we'll end the mask mandate on January 17th. Yesterday it was reported that 800,000 Americans have now died from COVID-19. And a few weeks ago, during Thanksgiving break, we learned of yet a new variant. The St. Louis Post-Dispatch reported today that the 7-day average of patients hospitalized with COVID-19 has more than doubled what it was a month ago. And St. Louis County reports only 56% of the county's population is fully vaccinated. Why should the Parkway Board keep its mask mandate? Because COVID isn't going away, and the mask mandate is working. Schools are open. Isn't that the goal? Why would the board want to change course when your policy has been successful? Why do I wear a mask? I wear a mask to protect our community, so schools will remain open for the elderly, for the immunocompromised, my neighbors, my family, and myself. I ask the Parkway Board to be courageous tonight and keep the mask mandate because it's effective and it works. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Amy Schur.
Good evening. My name is Amy Schur. I'm a parent of a child who is zoned for Craig Elementary. On Monday, I read this line in the health and safety update from Dr. Marty. It says that the responsibility for these decisions lies with us as district leaders and school board members. We take this responsibility very seriously. I would like an explanation for why we are gathering today to vote through this new policy change. If this were a decision based on science and public health, then you would have made this decision earlier in the year when the case count was much lower. Today, your website says that the spread of the community is in a state of high spread. Is it a scientific decision to make this decision at the worst part of the pandemic of the school year so far? Is this a decision geared towards protecting our children, the immunocompromised, the staff, the support staff, and everybody who works here? What about families with disabled people at home? What about teachers with children who are too young to be vaccinated? You're throwing not only our students, our teachers, but all those other people in our community under the bus for some kind of political grandstanding if you vote this through. If you do that, you'll have forfeited your responsibility to keep our students and our community safe. There will be interruptions to learning, and if you vote for this measure, then I would like you to know that you have given up that responsibility, and you should no longer claim to be taking that responsibility seriously, because it would become very clear that you are not. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Thalia Stein, followed by Pat McPartland and Rachel Limangu.
Hello, my name is Thalia Stein, and I have been a Parkway parent for about 22 years. And I am also here prompted by the letter from Dr. Marty expressing the change to these measures that we have been having in place. And I cannot add to all the qualified people that have been before me, but I would like to say that from my perspective, it's really like Groundhog Day again. We had this situation exactly like this in the beginning of summer. We had a variant, the Delta variant, rampaging through the world, and we had vaccines that just come out. Yet, we had the Delta totally overtake the country. Vaccines are nice to have, but they're not going into the arms of people in the amount that we would need them to create herd immunity. And right now, we have the perfect recipe for a repeat situation, and actually even worse. We have a new variant. We are having indoor winter air. Everybody's crammed inside. We're looking to holidays where people are going to be partying, gathering, traveling. And then in the middle of January, we're going to have a big surge. This is not maybe, hopefully not. This is a certainty. We have seen this happen again. This is Groundhog Day. So to lift a mandate in the middle of January when this is all going to come to fruition is really foolish and irresponsible. And I really urge you to please reconsider. I have all the respect for your work because it hasn't been easy. It has been with the ups and downs of a pandemic that has been politicized. So I really urge you to please make your decisions on the basis of health and safety for our children. I have a senior, and I would really like to have him graduate in person, and that will not happen if you follow through with this lifting of the mandate. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Pat McPartland.
Good evening. I'm Pat McPartland, president of Parkway NEA. I need to take a moment first to thank all the staff, all the employees in every building and every facility in Parkway who've managed to make this year work in yet another challenging year. It seems we can't get away from challenges, and I just want to thank them for the work they've done at every level. It's been just amazing. I wrote a letter to the board last week, and so I'll just paraphrase a couple pieces of that. This is a challenging time. It's a challenging year. There are new challenges, clearly, to the work that the district and every district is doing. Challenges to you as leaders. But challenges provide opportunities, opportunities to act. And I'll just remind you of something that Dr. Marty said at a board meeting in August of 2020. Dr. Marty pointed out that as the district navigated this COVID outbreak, that two things would undergird all the work that would be done: the health and safety of students and staff, and providing for a continuity of educational opportunity. The concerns that have been expressed by many in making a change at this time, I don't have to repeat those. You do have the power, very clearly by statute, to take action, whether the Attorney General believes that or not. And so the challenge to you is to take action to live up to those two pillars that were set out a year and a half ago to guide what the work of the district will be. Conditions right now, as others have said, do not speak to making a lot of changes. You have the ability, and you've done it in the past, to make changes over time as conditions warrant. So I ask you to look very hard at those elements, and again, remember the things that were established 18 months ago that are supposed to guide the work that you do. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Next up is Rachel Thimangu, followed by Aaron Beaver and Patrick Thimangu.
Good evening. Dr. Marty, members of the school board, thank you for hearing us out tonight. I came also to speak against the proposed policy change that would remove masking and also quarantine requirements for people who have had close exposures. We've talked a lot about masks, but that is also puts us in a high-risk situation. It takes up to 2 days to experience symptoms in which you can still pass on the COVID-19 and transmit it. I think the science has been clearly outlined here by a lot of people, so I want to tell you something a little bit different, a little bit personal. One of the statistics that we haven't talked about is that 1 in 100 people over 65 in this country have lost their lives to COVID, of those 800,000. One of those was my mother. She died almost exactly a year ago It'll be a year on Sunday. She was 85 years old. She was in a assisted living. She was quarantined. They were kept to themselves. My children, I'm a parent in the district, I should have said that. My children, who are Parkway students, didn't get to see her for much of the last year of her life. I just urge you to think about all those children, all those grandparents, all those families who, if you remove this mask mandate and put our children at risk and put them in a situation where they could be carriers of COVID because of exposures, lack of safety protocols, think about those times that they won't get to spend with their grandparents. Think about those times that they won't get to spend with people in the community or in their lives who are disabled or who cannot risk a COVID exposure. And please don't pass this change at this time. There's been a lot of eloquent speakers before me who presented the data. I firmly believe in it. Please stand up to the politics and do the right thing for our community.
Thank you. Next up is Aaron Beaver.
Hi, my name's Erin Beaver, and I'm coming to you today not just as a mother of a Parkway student, but also as a healthcare provider in the community. I'm a genetic counselor, and so I understand the science about viruses. Viruses are just genes, right? Why I think that it's important for me to be here today is because I have spent 10 years of my career caring for some of the most vulnerable patients and community members here in our area. And what I'm talking about specifically is children who have immune-compromised states, adults who have immune-compromised states, patients who have cancer and so are undergoing therapies which do compromise their immune systems, even though they may not necessarily have been born with a genetic condition that causes their immune system not to function appropriately. Even if these people in our community receive a vaccination, and many of them have, they are still vulnerable to this virus. So they are going to be the most likely to have a breakthrough case, and in fact, the most likely to have a severe breakthrough case. And that's very important because we have a number of our children that are in the special school district here that have those specific health concerns and concurrently have developmental concerns. And those families shouldn't be faced with the decision of protecting their child's life or sending them to school so that they can continue to develop and not lose milestones. I've dedicated my life to these patients in our community, and I ask that you really think about centering those which are the most vulnerable in our community. When you're making your decision tonight, please, I beg you to vote against this measure because, again, it does put them at risk. And I do want to thank you for taking quick action in 2020 and putting into place the current standards that we have for health guidelines. It made me feel comfortable as a parent to send my child back to school. And I just thank you for those decisions, and I ask you to please continue making those same strong public health positive decisions.
Thank you. Next up is Patrick Thimangu.
Dr. Marty and members of the board and everybody that's here, my name is Patrick Thimangu and my wife just spoke, and so I'm not going to say much. We've had experts speak that are much more educated than me and knowledgeable, doctors, scientists. I think all I would urge is for the board to act boldly. Be brave and do that which might not be the popular thing to do. We all know one truth. Online school is not the thing we want to go back to. We all know the damage it's done. We all know, forgetting everything else, even simple economics, there's nothing as cheap as a mask to slow this thing down. We know it's been proven. And so if slowing this thing down means putting on a mask for just a little longer, I don't think anybody should mind. I think we are blessed to be in a country where we can actually make this choice and talk about things like this. We've lost 800,000 people, but we can sit here and talk about whether we want to roll the dice again and keep rolling these dice. And 800,000 people is the size of St. Louis. It's the size of small cities. I come from Kenya, which is a third world country, where people don't question masking because it's the only thing they have. They don't have another choice. Nobody's got the money to buy the medicine. The government doesn't have money to get vaccines to everybody. The cheapest thing they can find is a mask. And because of that, the numbers are much, much lower. We know this. So I urge the board to make that bold choice. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, we are going to take a brief recess, and we will resume the meeting shortly. Okay, we will pick up where we left off. That is 9.0, the approval of the agenda. May I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda for the regular meeting of the Board of Education is scheduled for December 15th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. The next regular board meeting will take place on Wednesday, January 19th, 2022, beginning at 7 p.m. here at the Parkway Welcome Center. Next up is 10.02, board candidate filing. As of today, December 15th, 2021, 9 candidates have filed for the 2 open positions on the Parkway Board of Education. I will now state the candidates' names in the order they have filed and allow them to stand if they're in the audience. The candidates in order of filing and as their names will appear on the ballot are Jeffrey Spector, Pam Hill, Robert Reety, Hallie Baker, Philip Caldwell, Barbara Bouchart, Wayne Hartman, Marla Kolick, and Jake Wagner. Okay. The election will be held Tuesday, April 5th. The terms of Ms. Hill and Dr. Ciartino will expire in April 2022. Next up, we have a reasonably small consent agenda, which the board has been reviewing the last...
Board Superintendent.
Oh, you know what? I did. I skipped right over Board Superintendent. I skipped right over my own report. So we will start down there with Matt and do Board Superintendent reports.
I'll just be very quick. I thank everybody for coming out tonight and speaking. We do appreciate the great discussions we have here with you, giving your points of view and being very respectful. And then also via email. We've gotten a lot of emails over the past week, and just the thoughtfulness in the emails, both in terms of the concerns, the stories we've been told, and the even support too, thanking us for our service too. So we do appreciate that too, because it has been a tough time. But thank you for all the feedback. We do take it. We do all read every email that comes through too. So thank you for that.
Well, Matt was all short, and you all know me, I'm not short. I did attend several meetings this month. One of them was PAMI, the Parent Advocacy for Multicultural Excellence in Education, meeting. This is an incredible group of parents in our district that's almost like a district-wide PTO. They support the district's diversity inclusion initiatives, and they make sure that all voices are heard. This month, they had a presentation by 2 parents, Tiandra Bland and May Shia, basically about how they support the inclusion efforts in the districts. And there was a quote that I believe Ms. Bland said during the presentation that I just loved and I wanted to share. We want our children to feel the same beauty in the instructional process as all children. I just loved that, and these 2 parents did such an incredible presentation that I wanted to share that. I also attended the Food Pantry Advisory, and I'm going to be part of a subcommittee that is going to be exploring whether there will be a 501c3 nonprofit developed in relation to the food pantry, so I'm looking forward to that. And finally, I was going to say something about the emails too. I love the parental involvement in this district. The fact that you all know you can reach out to us. And Matt says that he read every email. Tonight I'm going to say I tried. The past few days I haven't kept up the way I should, but I at least looked at every single one. We've gotten a massive amount of feedback on this proposal. And I read every single one I could. And when people spoke tonight, I noted their names and I recognized some of the names from those emails. And just thank you for promoting civil dialogue in our district, because it's so important. I've said this before, we're all in this together, and we've got to act like it. Thanks.
I just want to echo what Matt and Pam also said. It's so important that we all understand the difficulty that we're in at this point in time regarding a situation like this. It's not easy, and we listen to all points of view, and we take them very, very seriously, and we just try to make the best decision, for our students, our faculty, our administration, staff, and community. And that nothing that's decided tonight is going to be etched in stone, that it would not have some possible change when the right time comes and the right need comes. So at this point in time, we thank everyone for their input, their feedback, and their perspective, and we take it very seriously, and we thank you very much for the time and effort to send us emails and calls, and the time that you've taken to do this really does make a difference and really does help us a great deal.
This being our last meeting before winter break, I just want to take a minute to acknowledge and recognize the teachers, the nurses, the counselors, the social workers, the principals, the assistant principals, the administration of this district for their work this past, I don't know, whenever we started school this year, 3 months, 4 months. We all said 2020 was hard, and we're all realizing that 2021 has been even harder. And our staff are also parents. Our staff are also have moms and dads. Our staff also have brothers and sisters, and it's been a hard year. And I think that our teachers and staff are doing amazing work, working with kids who have been out of school for a while, working with increased social emotional needs of kids, getting kids caught back up on reading and math and some of what they missed last year. So I just want to take a minute as we go into this break to give my thanks to all those people for all the extra hours they're putting in this year, to acknowledge that, and to hope that some of that eases in 2022.
So as usual, my colleagues have expressed a lot of my sentiments, only more eloquently, but I'll add on to what's been said already. The big question, why are we here tonight? Obviously, we're here because we have a board meeting, but the issue that the forefront of everyone's mind is this mask issue. And the answer to that question might not be as clear. We live in a world that's not exactly black and white. There's not a lot of absolutes, but more nuance. What does the law say? What does an order mean? But the takeaway from what brings us here is that this district has to have a plan going forward, and this board has to be the one that approves it. And what goes into the recommendation isn't just an email that you all receive, or Dr. Marty pens at his desk and passes out to the rest of us, but it's the result of deliberation by very talented people and people who care a whole lot and work very, very hard to come up with a proposal that it carries out our objectives as a district. And it's never gonna be perfect. In my day job, my role is usually to involve myself in a dispute, and if we come out on the other end with everybody equally unhappy, then I've done my job. And I think our plan tonight might fit that description as well. But the recommendation, as it's going to be discussed, the thing that gives me comfort is that it baked into the equation is flexibility that allows the district to pivot as necessary and as circumstances require. So I'll conclude by just thanking the administration, thanking the staff, thanking everybody whose efforts have contributed to the proposal that's going to be before us tonight, and acknowledge that those folks are doing an admirable job under very difficult circumstances. And I also want to thank Jeff Todd. My colleagues mentioned the avalanche of emails we receive, and as Matt says, he's read every word of every one of them, and it may go without saying, but Matt's a way better board member than I am. We all try to keep up with them, but Jeff is tasked with issuing responses to everyone, and does so in a timely and professional and admirable way. And I just want to make sure that that is acknowledged, how much we appreciate those efforts.
And I would, to tag on to that, not every school board does that, so thank you very much, and to Dr. Marty as well. I know that you two kind of tag teamed and helped to kind of help divide the load, if you will, a little bit with the responses, but it is so important that we do stay in communication with our Parkway community. We're truly blessed to be in this district, and I too welcome the civility of everyone in their comments, to still remain respectful while we're still talking about very difficult issues and difficult decisions. Another couple of reports I'd like to make is that I attended the Special School District Governing Council meeting on December 6th. And from that meeting, we received a framework of a new strategic plan that district is developing. They have never come forward with a true solid strategic plan. They have their comprehensive school improvement plan, which we also reviewed that evening and received updates on that. But now they're actually adding a true, if you will, strategic plan. So there's a number of elements to that they are identifying as their top priorities based on surveys that they have done, focus groups that have been conducted. Their number one priority right now is to get some consistent systems in place throughout the partner districts and within each of their buildings. So that is something that will be their primary focus moving forward. Once the strategic plan is fully developed, we just received a framework from a very high-level viewpoint that evening. We will receive more of the details of that strategic plan coming forward in the spring and then vote on that. I also attended a government relations meeting last week. This is, Parkway hosted this. This is a legislative meeting that Parkway has in concert with the Pattonville School District. The legislators, since they cross over, some of them between Parkway and Pattonville, they are all in attendance, or their representatives as well, along with the Ed Plus organization, which all of our school districts in the St. Louis metropolitan area participate in, and the special school district. So it was a very nice time to meet with our legislators or their representatives to talk about some of the key issues that are going forward in state and federal legislation on education. I think our takeaway message is that moving forward in the next year, we're going to see hundreds of bills come out, proposed on public education. They're not all positive, and so we would just encourage our community to stay on top of these efforts and keep up your advocacy for public education, because we need your efforts with that as well, because it's going to be difficult to manage some of these new things that they do go through. So we just need to stay on top of it, work with our legislators.
Thank you. Thank you all for your comments. And I would also like to thank all my fellow board members for all the time that they've put in these last few weeks. It seems like we've had a few extra meetings trying to wrap our heads around some of the things going on. So we are as much in the know as we can be. So I appreciate that effort. And I too joined Debbie on the Government Relations Committee that was, or meeting that was always a good time to not only network with the neighboring districts and their boards, but to see and talk with our elected officials who join us for those and find out what's going on in their world and get to share what's going on in our world. It really helps those relationships. Dr. Marty and I met with a number of doctors just a week or so ago with our health advisory meeting, and as always, they provided some very invaluable information and very important counsel to us. So we appreciate that input. We had a board workshop a week or so ago, which was primarily focused on the facilities 2030 plan. It's where we're going structurally and technologically over the next 10 years, and how we're going to get there, and how we're going to continue to be a great destination district for so many things. And then yesterday I got to participate in the monthly food pantry distribution to some 300 some odd families that are food insecure, frankly. They don't oftentimes know where their next meals are coming from. And I've done it before, but this month with the winter break coming up and holidays, it's especially important that those families have someone to lean on. And I'm proud of the Parkway students, the middle school students who really got this thing kicked into gear a few years ago, and amazingly proud of the work that our general volunteers at large and many of our social workers and others, the time that they've invested in this. It's an amazing operation to see. Anybody can volunteer for different aspects of it. But yesterday we had a bunch of folks from our TLA department, and I spent a lot of time with a number of the counselors who help run that day or the days leading up to it. And one of the interesting things, and there were very few lulls, but when we had a lull, my conversation was typically talking with counselors in the district about how our kids are doing. And there's a lot of conversation about how kids are doing with regard to COVID. But one of the things that I talked to a couple people about was the mental health of our students. And we did something a few years ago. We had a mental health task force, and out of that grew a number of recommendations that the board has approved, and we're beginning to put those things into place. But the takeaway for me was the counselor that said 3 or 4 years ago, it was status quo. Kids were kids. Kids were the way they usually are. They don't open up about themselves. They don't open up about their problems. But he said in the last 2 to 3 years, even with COVID, that there was a remarkable difference in how kids are owning their mental health. And I attribute that to having our care coordinators in the building, to having more open conversations about mental health, to having the resources that we have available to students and families. And so I really just applaud our entire community for really stepping forward and moving forward together to help promote positive mental health for our students. So,
speaking of that, Mr. Todd, tomorrow night we are having a mental health, I think this is the second, Dr. Matheson, of quarterly meetings. Tomorrow night's topic is when emotional pain becomes physical, recognizing and talking about self-injury. Tomorrow night, it's a virtual gathering. There is registration required. I will tell you, this is Dr. Matheson. If anyone wants information about our mental health task force, its work, what we've implemented, Aaron Choki, who coordinates our guidance program and character education, but we'd be happy, and as Mr. Todd said, there's more and more openness about the subject. So tomorrow night, if anybody hasn't registered, you can go online, I believe, and still register and get a link to that program tomorrow night. As far as the food pantry goes, I stopped by, and we should note that we had a wonderful representation yesterday of some of our legislators, actually, helping out yesterday at the food pantry, plus many other volunteers. We have such a great group of community volunteers. Mr. Todd was working very, very hard yesterday, so it was wonderful to see him. We are, as part of the information that we shared with the board last week at our workshop was, where are we going with our virtual campus program? You may know that we last year established the first year of full year of COVID. We had a number of our students, a large number, probably over 30% of our students that were learning virtually. This year we have less, but we still have about 800 students that are learning virtually, K-12. And Dr. Beckner provided the board with some information where we think that program is going. And Dr. Beckner is doing some work regionally to see if we can cooperate so that as that number potentially dwindles, but there'll still be a number of families that will choose to stay virtual, how we can maintain the program, perhaps partnering with other school districts in the region. So, and I had the pleasure of seeing Dr. Beckner and Dr. Stanfeld present to our county superintendents on Friday and get a very good response in regards to our willing to take on the leadership of that and to invite other schools in. We had some good news that I know Mr. Tandy and his department are going to promote, but U.S. News and World Report has traditionally recognized America high schools as outstanding, the best schools in the country. Our 4 high schools are traditionally on that list. We just got notice that they're now expanding that to both middle and high school, or middle and elementary. And all 5 of our middle schools made the list, and a number of our elementary schools made it, and if they did not, they still noted them in some of their high qualities. So we're very, very proud of all our schools, and it's great to see them expand that recognition to elementary and middle schools. As was mentioned, legislative work is underway. We at Parkway will be bringing that to the board in January. Our legislative priorities, we always try to weigh in a positive way to try to encourage our legislators to support things that we think are in the best interest of Parkway. So we'll bring that to the board. But as was mentioned, we try to communicate and stay in touch with what goes on in Jefferson City. And then last month, if you've been following the board's work, the board did approve a change in boundaries with our middle school changes. And I'm proud to say that our principals, thanks to Dr. Watson working with them, immediately held orientation programs here at South Middle and at Southwest Middle for the new families coming to them from Piermont to here from Piermont here to South Middle, and the Hannah families going to Southwest Middle. And it was well received. Families, the principals are welcoming, and it was great to see families really start to grasp and being welcomed into their new schools. So that was wonderful to see that, and it happened quickly, certainly after the approval. I believe, Mr. Todd, that's my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we will approve the consent agenda. So may I have a motion and a second, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented in the December 15th, 2021 board materials?
So moved.
Second.
Is there anything to be pulled to action or closed? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. Next up, we have 12.01, which is the approval of audit and comprehensive annual financial report. So I'd like to welcome Mrs. Patty Bedborough, our Chief Financial Officer, and Brittany Wolfram from Kerber, Eck, and Brakel, LLP, to join us at the podium.
Good evening, President Todd, Vice President Hopper, members of the Board of Education, Dr. Marty, Mrs. Stover, and our audience. Tonight, we have before you not only our comprehensive audit report, but we're also included in the board package is our comprehensive annual financial statements as well. Our Director of Finance, Brian Whittle, prepares all of our financial statements for the district. He does a tremendous job. He and his team in the finance department assist our auditors when they are doing their internal field work. There are numerous questions following up on audit materials, etc., to then lead us to be able to have what would be called a clean audit, or in accounting terms that doesn't sound so nice, but unmodified opinion. So that is the highest opinion that we can obtain, so we have done that. And the auditors give an opinion not only on our financial statements, but also then give an opinion on us following all of the guidance from the Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, also known as DESE, and then also opinion on how we follow all the programs and rules that go along with our federal funding. So with that overview, I want to turn over the presentation to Brittany Wolfram. She's a manager for KEB, and we are very, very pleased to have her as our manager on site for our audit.
I feel like you stole my whole presentation from me. Okay. So as Patty said, I'm Brittany Wolfram. I was the manager on this audit engagement. So management's responsibility during our audit, they are supposed to prepare the financial statements in accordance with the GAAP framework, and then it's our job to express an opinion on the fair presentation. So we performed our audit in accordance with 3 different sets of standards. We used generally accepted auditing standards, government auditing standards, and uniform guidance. And then as Patty said, we did issue an unmodified opinion, which is one of 3 opinions. The unmodified opinion is the best opinion that you can have. It means we did not know any material issues or weaknesses, and that the audit was perfect in our standards. So as part of our audit, we also test internal controls. We do not provide an opinion over internal controls, but we do perform the testing during our audit. We did not know any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, so nothing to report there. We also test compliance with laws, regulations, contracts, and grants, and we are happy to note that we did not have any instances of non-compliance. And then, as Patty said, the second opinion that we provide is over federal awards. So this is all the federal dollars that you do receive, or that the district receives. And as part of these federal awards, we test the expenditures. As part of our audit, we have to test at least 20% of all federal expenditures, since you are a low-risk auditee, meaning you are in compliance with GAAP, you haven't had findings in the past 2 years. So Parkway's been on a great track. So we test 20% of all federal expenditures. The major programs that we tested this year are 2 new COVID grants. One is the Education Stabilization Fund, and this includes ESSER 1 and 2 funds, as well as the GEAR or the Transportation Supplement Fund. The other COVID grant was the Coronavirus Relief Fund. And then lastly, we tested Title I, which we've tested in previous years. For all 3 of these grants, we noted no issues. They totaled about $5.5 million of all federal expenditures. The total of all federal expenditures this year was about $9 million. So we had almost 56% coverage. So we are happy to say that the district is in compliance with all federal requirements. On this, we issued an unmodified opinion, which again is a clean opinion. We tested internal controls over these programs in addition to compliance, and we did not note any instances of material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. We had no audit findings this year related to federal programs. The third opinion we give is over state compliance. So Missouri laws and regulations require us to audit budgetary and disbursement procedures, as well as accurate attendance and transportation records. We did not note any issues with these. We performed our audit in accordance with attestation standards established by the AICPA, and again, we issued an unmodified or clean opinion. And then we are required to communicate a few other things to you. The significant accounting policies are described in Note A, or the first note to the financial statements. This is where it discloses the basis of accounting that the district reports on, which is the accrual basis of accounting. The significant estimates relate to the net pension liability and OPEB liability, and these are based on actuarially determined amounts. We did not note any transactions that lacked authoritative guidance. The financial statements are consistent, neutral, and clear. We did not have any difficulties with management during our audit, and we did not have any disagreements with them. We did not note any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. We did obtain a representation letter from management that they signed saying that they believe that the financial statements are clear and accurate and that they are taking responsibility for them. And this was upon approval of the financial statements on December 6, 2021. And then as far as we know, management did not have consultations with any other independent accountants. And then lastly, I just wanted to thank the district. Brian and Patty lead a great team, and they were very welcoming to us when we were on site and provided us with everything we needed when we needed it. We do have a lot of questions as auditors, and everybody kind of stops what they're doing to give us what we need. So it was a very efficient, smooth audit, which was nice. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for me?
I would just say that, we're always glad to hear that kind of report. I think for any superintendent and board who, again, the community entrusts us to, be responsible for the tax dollars and expenditures and then all the procedures and rules that Patty and her department and her personnel must follow, it's vital that we have these kind of positive reports, because I think it then really reinforces, again, the outstanding folks we have, but also the trust our community places in our leadership. And so I'm delighted to have the report. I think the board is. We again have had, in my tenure here, have had just wonderful work by our financial and people who are accountable for our resources, our tax dollars, and how they are used and how we record them and follow all the rules. So Patty, you and Brian, we're very proud of you, and thank you for all that work.
Well, thank you very much. And as I said, the statements and, the cash basis, the accrual basis, and the government-wide statements, they're all created by Brian. So, big kudos to Brian for his genius in putting that all together as well.
Thank you. So may I have a motion and a second that the Board of Education approve the 2020-2021 audit report as presented in the December 15th, 2021 board meeting materials?
So moved.
Second.
Nikki, would you please call roll?
Ms. Davis?
Yes.
Ms. Hill?
Yes.
Mrs. Hopper?
Yes.
Mr. Schindler?
Yes.
Dr. Ciartino?
Yes.
Mr. Seltzer?
Yes.
Mr. Todd?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Next, I would like to call on Dr. Keith Marty, our superintendent, and Dr. Chelsea Watson, deputy superintendent, to present the pandemic response plan and accompanied resolution.
Well, thank you, Mr. Todd. So I'm going to make a few comments before I turn it over to Dr. Watson, who will provide more details. But certainly we're here tonight to hear details about our pandemic response plan moving forward for the remainder of the semester and then into the second semester as well. As many of you are aware, the Cole County Court ruled recently that health departments do not have the authority to ensure that they issue mandates. But what was not impacted is the authority of the local school district, their governing body, our school board. The Parkway Board has a statutory duty under state law to govern the operations of the school district. There are a number of statutes, 4 to be specific, that grant boards of education general control of their school district and authorize them to make all rules and regulations that are needed to govern their district. This includes certainly the health and safety of all our students. And this is exactly what our board does each month. The court case had nothing to do with the authority of governing bodies or school boards. The judge did, however, reference quarantines of students, and Dr. Watson will talk about that. Thus, the proposed plan is recommending some changes to the work that we have been doing, and we're asking the board to approve that tonight as we proceed forward. The recommendation addressing face coverings, including exploring a mask optional environment, was unrelated to the Cole County ruling. I can tell you that Parkway, along with other districts, because I sit with superintendents nearly every week, have been considering a plan to transition to a mask optional environment now for several months. And the plans at several districts you may have been following, other districts certainly have been addressing this as well. And it's a matter of determining when exactly that might happen. And as Dr. Watson will present the plan, we're providing a recommendation, but this Board of Education will have and will meet every 30 days as we move forward now to determine whether there's any changes to that recommendation. So per the Cole County ruling, this order from the board is good for the 30 days and must be extended by the action of the board each 30 days. Please know and understand that the administration may recommend updates from time to time for the board to review as it considers the pandemic response needed, whether that's data, information, or changes that we would bring to the board. And the board always has the authority to approve or disapprove our recommendation. So it is now time to have Dr. Watson to detail what we're bringing to the board tonight, and then we'll present a resolution for this board to consider in a few moments. But Dr. Watson, if you would proceed with some of the details.
Thank you, Dr. Marty. Good evening, President Todd, Vice President Hopper, members of the board, Dr. Marty, Mrs. Stover. First and foremost, why are we really here? We're here about our Parkway mission. Our Parkway mission, as you all know, is at the center of every single thing that we do. And this year, more than ever, our mission truly, truly has come to life. And I always thought it came to life prior to the past 18 months. But as we think about the work that we are doing to help our students navigate this ever-changing world, those who thought about this mission many, many years ago knew exactly what they were doing as we think about those 4 C's. And our staff continues to do an amazing job staying mission focused. So, kids at the focus of this conversation today, along with our staff. So the current pandemic response plan is currently on the Parkway website. And if you look at the topics in black, those topics are currently covered in our pandemic response plan. And those topics have not changed in this proposal. So tonight, I'm not going to talk about the things on the left-hand side of the screen. I'm going to focus the time on the topics in red, because these are aspects of the proposal that have changed from what we currently have been living in Parkway as part of our pandemic response plan. Face coverings. Masks, face coverings, will continue to be required for all students, all staff, anyone in a Parkway building through January 17th, 2022. As we get closer to winter break, we want to do our due diligence in helping families and helping our students and helping our staff stay as healthy as can be so they can enjoy the winter break with family and friends. In addition, when we come back, we know our high schoolers are preparing for finals. We want them to be able to return and be in the best environment that we can create to help maintain their overall healthy and positive state. So with that, we hope to limit the transmission of COVID-19 when we return from winter break. Thus, this date, as you see it right now. Masks will continue to be required on school buses and optional for outdoors. In this proposal, masks will be recommended but not required inside of all Parkway buildings effective January 18th. This next sentence in bold, what did I say the wrong? January 18th, 2022. Did I say the wrong date? Okay. This next sentence was recently added. So in the communications that went out earlier this week, this sentence was not there. But based on some ongoing conversations, we decided that this was important to add to this proposal. The sentence, as you can see, states, "This is subject to change based on conditions in each particular school building, conditions in the community at large, and the CDC guidelines." We are recommending in this proposal that the Parkway Board of Education review timely data as we move forward toward second semester, but before second semester begins. This first sentence that you see on this slide is information that was in the initial proposal that was shared earlier this week. The sentence in bold is revised language. To be clear, the administration is recommending this change in language so everyone is aware that the Board of Education has a 30-day requirement, as Dr. Marty previously mentioned. Within the 30-day window, our Parkway Board of Education, we are recommending that our Parkway Board of Education meet and review health conditions prior to second semester beginning. Again, we want to propose that our board review the data, review the health conditions as we enter January before the next approval date. If we have a COVID outbreak at any point in time as we move forward, the expectations for wearing masks will be required for a temporary period of time at a particular building where the outbreak has occurred. If indeed, we are mask recommended, this might happen a little bit more than it would happen if we are mask optional. So an outbreak is when a school has 2% or more of the student population testing positive for COVID-19 at any given time, or a minimum of 8 students. If a school has a COVID outbreak, masks will be required for all individuals in the school building for 2 weeks, 14 calendar days, once the positivity rate reaches a specific threshold, which we'll get to in just a minute. If indeed we have a COVID outbreak, and if we are using these thresholds, we will limit even more visitors in the building, which I will talk about a little bit later because we hope to make an adjustment there. And we will also limit any field trips that our kids might be going on to keep them as safe as possible. The goal is to limit the additional spread of COVID-19, of course, to keep our staff, to keep our students, and to keep our families at home as healthy as we can. We certainly will continue to update the community dashboard and monitor the overall health of our staff and our students. Note that due to the Cole County, Missouri case that Dr. Marty mentioned earlier, the St. Louis County Health Department no longer has the authority to issue certain orders after December 22nd. So with this being the case, COVID-19 will be treated as similar to the other contagious illnesses using our current board policy along with state statute. Effective December 23rd, the following protocol will be in place. Individuals affected with COVID positive, will not be permitted to be in our schools. Prior to returning to work or to school, students or staff will need to present a COVID negative test. And if the individual has not obtained that COVID negative test, the individual must work with the school nurse. And the school nurse will then provide a date that the individual can return, which is based on when the symptoms began. 10 days after the symptoms began, the nurse can communicate when that individual can return to our schools. Upon further review with our health services department, we do not need a physician's note in this area. Please also note that we will not be accepting at-home COVID tests. This next section deals with individuals who have symptoms of COVID-19. So also effective December 23rd, individuals with symptoms will also be treated based on our board policy. We will follow through based on board policy. And the following protocol will be in place. Students and staff members will not be allowed to attend school. Prior to returning to school or work, they must produce a negative COVID test or a physician's diagnosis other than COVID-19. And the same also happens per what I said a few minutes ago, if an individual does not have the opportunity to get a COVID negative test, or get a COVID test to bring in a negative result, or produce a doctor's note stating that they don't have COVID, they can work with our school nurse, and our school nurse will be able to communicate when they can return to school based on the onset of symptoms. And again, we will not accept an at-home COVID test. I mentioned thresholds a little while ago. And this is going to get a little wordy and might get a little confusing, so I'm going to take it slow. So on the screen, you see our in-person numbers for our schools. And you also see the thresholds, and it's a little small, but you also see those thresholds there. And you're probably asking, why in the world did we identify 2%? We did not just grab that number out of the air. Carter, who you will see up here a little while ago, worked with Dr. Beckner, and they love numbers. And they did a phenomenal job in providing us good data to help us make this decision. So, a few points to consider and to think about. From the beginning of this school year until December 1st, our Parkway mitigation strategies were successful, and we have stayed in school. We have been able to continue with in-person learning. Through quarantining, isolation, universal face covering, social distancing, we can report the following information for this school year. 1, only 11 Parkway schools ever exceeded 1% of the students being positive COVID positive at any given time. 6 Parkway schools exceeded 2% of students being positive for COVID-19 at any given time. Only 4 Parkway schools ever exceeded 3% of students being positive for COVID-19 at any given time. And only 1 school, Fern Ridge, with 99 students, reached 4% of students being positive at any given time. In a small school, a 2% threshold may be a function of school size rather than the spread of illness. To account for this, as you see at the bottom of the screen, a minimum number of COVID cases is needed, which is set at 8 students or 2% of a school population of 400 students. After analysis of these data, it's reasonable to conclude that a 2% threshold, positivity threshold for a school to return to universal masking with a minimum of 8 students who are positive will provide the opportunity to stop the potential exponential spread of illness in our schools before school closure or before any other significant interventions might have to be considered. Through contact tracing, through our vaccination uploads, voluntary vaccination uploads, we can extrapolate that about 88% of staff are currently vaccinated, a much higher percentage than what we know about our students. And also, we are just beginning to collect the vaccination information for our elementary students if parents want to voluntarily upload that information. Based on our analysis, inclusion of staff in this particular metric would make it less likely that an outbreak among our student population would result in a school reaching the threshold to return to universal face coverings. As a result, this is why we made the decision to focus on this particular metric. Again, we'll continue to publish the information on our community dashboard, and we will continue to practice the mitigation efforts that we certainly can to keep kids healthy and our staff healthy. So now that I just explained those thresholds, I want to go back to a little bit of information around face coverings. I just want to make sure that everybody does understand that the district is required, and we heard it from one of our speakers earlier, to provide a safe learning environment for all, including those with certain disabilities. Therefore, despite the thresholds that I just shared, despite those thresholds, there may be times in certain classrooms, based on student need and based on faculty needs and based on those safety needs of our students and our faculty, that masks may be required. And that is important to note, that that is a possibility based on staff and student need. Close contacts. Students and staff will not be excluded from school or work solely as a result of being a close contact with a positive case at school, regardless of vaccination status. That also is a change from our current practice. However, per board policy and Missouri law, should the district receive evidence that a close contact may be liable to transmit COVID-19 after exposure, whether that's at home or not, or whether that's at school or not, the district, we can exercise our authority per our policy and per the law to require testing of that student or staff member and exclude that student or staff member if they refuse to take a test or if they test positive. Events and activities. The first 2 bullets have not changed from our current plan. Field trips. We have halted field trips since the beginning of COVID when we returned back at school, except a very few exceptions the past couple of months, specifically a couple of high school courses where the students are going to the climbing wall and they're going to be outside only with the students in the class. Some of our kids are canoeing on Creve Coeur Lake. They're only with the students in that class. We have approved those field trips. We would like to start approving field trips per our normal process second semester, as long as we can keep our students as safe as possible when going on those trips. And I can tell you that a lot of principals have asked about, end of the year going to the park, some of those 5th grade celebrations that are typically outside. So we will have to focus on reducing or making sure that, we are reducing the exposure to COVID if those field trips are approved by our building leaders. We also know that visitors and volunteers are ready to help inside our school buildings. And so we anticipate being able to make some adjustments for visitors and volunteers beginning January 18th, if our conditions allow that, and we believe it is safe for that to occur. Our building leaders just received some details about that. If indeed we go in that direction, that process will not begin until we return from winter break in regards to communicating the process with our volunteers and what paperwork they have to do to be approved to be a volunteer. Preschool, just as a clarification for our preschool and early childhood families. Previously, the language in the plan is that first bullet, okay? Based on some questions, we want it to be very clear. So it is shifting to early childhood will maintain their current mask protocol, and effective December 23rd, early childhood will follow the policies that I just talked about in regards to our communicable diseases being positive or having symptoms of COVID-19. So in conclusion, we have some updates that I shared throughout the presentation that weren't part of the original communication earlier this week. And so I just want to review those one more time. The first one, masks will be recommended but not required inside all Parkway schools and buildings effective January 18th. This is subject to change based on conditions in each particular school building, conditions in the community at large, and the CDC guidelines. So that second sentence was added. The Board of Education will review the health conditions the week of January 10th, ahead of January 18th. I think I talked through that. We want to look at what's going on in our community and so forth to identify if this is the direction that we should continue moving. The physician diagnosis, other than COVID-19, is not necessary when you are positive. And then I just went over the changes with early childhood. With that, I'm going to stop talking. I think I've talked a little bit here, talked enough, and open it up for any questions that you might have for me or any members of the team. And our Director of Health Services is also here this evening.
Chelsea, can you go back one slide?
Absolutely, yes.
Just to clarify, bullet 2.
Yes.
The Board of Education will review the health conditions the week of January 10th and will vote on the pandemic response plan that week.
Yes.
So it's not just that we're looking at it, we are also voting that week.
Yes, because we have to stay within the 30 days.
Correct.
And our next board meeting would be beyond the 30 days.
Correct.
So yes.
And you will be voting every 30 days.
Correct.
Moving forward.
And Chelsea, just to clarify, that the last sentence of the first paragraph, where it says we're looking at individual buildings as well as community at large and CDC guidelines, at that January 10th-ish meeting, we as a board, if we are to approve the recommendation today at that meeting, we could continue to demand masks in every school based on the community, demand's too strong a word. require masking in schools based on the community numbers we would see at that time. Is that correct?
Yes, that would be a decision that you would make, yes.
So we will all meet and vote again before any masks policy would change?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's correct to say, we're just gonna get this real clear, that a vote tonight, if we vote yes tonight, that yes vote keeps the mask requirement in place through January 17th.
Yes, you are correct.
Then, the week of January 10th, we will vote on what happens beginning on January 18th.
Yes, you will have the opportunity to review data, look at the dashboard, look to see if there are any updates with the CDC, look at our community spread, look, our dashboard, for those of you who don't look at it, and I know you guys look at it, often, provides specific zip code data within our community. If you haven't taken a look at that, I highly suggest that you do.
So while some may be hopeful that as of January 18th, the community data would suggest that it's safe, that CDC guidelines would change and say it's safe to go to masks recommended in schools. If that data does not suggest and support that, if our medical community suggests that we need to keep masks required, if CDC guidelines continue to suggest that St. Louis County is at a place where we need to be requiring masks in our schools, we can vote the week of January 10th to postpone any change in our any change in our status, and we can vote to keep our mask requirement in place. But a yes vote is needed tonight in order to put that mask requirement in place, or keep that mask requirement in place now. Correct?
Yes.
Correct.
And to make the changes to how we isolate students to follow our communicable disease policies.
Okay.
Chelsea, so on that issue, the slide that you first showed us that had the bold print with that change on face covering issues, can we see that slide? Here we go. And then the next one. It just says we'll meet to review the health conditions the week of, ahead of.
So that, to clarify, you will have, because you have to vote every 30 days,
Right.
yes. So that
So
will
we
be
can
a
just
vote.
agree that we don't need that language here, but it's an understanding that by law, that's what we have to do.
Yes, and that will be in the resolution that I believe Mr. Todd is going to read in a little bit.
Yes, that's correct. In fact, we're voting on the resolution, and the resolution basically transfers, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but it gives acknowledges that the Board of Education has that authority to make those decisions every 30 days. And it's worth noting that it doesn't have to be necessarily exactly 30 days. It can't be longer than 30 days.
Yes.
So in this instance, we're going to vote on this tonight, and if we approve it tonight, then we have until, the 14th or the 13th or something to meet that 30 days. And then we could conceivably vote again at our regularly scheduled board meeting on the 19th to renew that 30-day time period. And then either we would have a special meeting to keep us within that 30 days, or we would have a regularly scheduled meeting that would fall in that 30-day period. So we might be voting after 27 days or something.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure I had that right.
Yes, because we certainly cannot allow 30 days to pass without you all voting on our pandemic response plan. And to be honest with you, I don't know if that's for life or if that ends at a certain date. If that's what we're going to do from now on. I'm not quite sure about that. If that
Well,
has an ending date.
I believe Christy, who works in this field every day, I think until the governor's declares we don't have a state of emergency, correct?
Okay.
Is that right, Christy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Chelsea, I think it's also important that we understand, the community understands why we have to vote on this tonight. because of a December 23rd deadline, correct?
22nd.
Well, the 22nd, right, and then
Yes.
the 23rd, the new rules go into effect. So it's important that we come to a conclusion and a vote tonight on a plan before December 23rd.
Yes, and that is next week, and that is right at the time of winter break. And I doubt you all want to be here after winter break or right before winter break. So I would, yes, so we are recommending that you take a look at this resolution, and we are recommending that you approve the resolution, which in turn is the plan that we have in place as of right now.
So then tonight, basically, we'll start our 30-day cycle, at which time, close to January, sometime the week of January the 10th, we will vote. And then what our plan is to review again and perhaps even vote again. We would vote again at our January 19th board meeting so that we can get on to our 30-day cycle of reviewing and approving or tweaking every 30 days at all of our board meetings, so that we're not meeting at awkward times between each of our board meetings. Now, depending on how our board meetings land within a 30-day period, we may have to have another special meeting in between because of an extended period of time, like over spring break, that we won't meet that 30-day. And it's important we meet the 30 days, because if we don't meet the 30 days, we cannot make any more changes, right, for 180 days.
That is my understanding.
So we have to stay on track with this
Yes.
30-day cycle.
And I want to tell you that Mrs. Stover has been very, very diligent.
Yes, she has.
in looking at the dates and looking at the calendar. So I am confident, I am 100% confident that we will not allow us to get to day 30 before this board receives a plan and has the opportunity to vote. Right, Mrs. Stover?
This is very confusing, all these dates and so forth. Just to be clear, so tonight, we are only voting on the first 30 days of the plan. All we're able to, as a board, is to vote for 30 days. We cannot go beyond that. So technically, we're not actually gonna vote on the January 18th change at this point in time.
You're voting to approve the resolution. And the resolution is telling us that you have to vote on a plan every 30 days or before every 30 days. And so this is the plan that we are providing you to consider as part of what you have to do when you think about the resolution. And so this plan can be updated, just like we communicated a plan the other day, based on ongoing conversations and ongoing changes as we continue to read what is sent to us from experts. We made some changes here to recommend to you. And as we present the plan to you in the future, additional changes could be made in addition to your input and feedback as you look at data and look at the trends as we move forward.
And Matt, to be clear, the plan we are voting on provides for a mask optional situation in January. However, what we're trying to make abundantly clear is that even though we are agreeing, if we adopt this resolution, what we're saying is if we adopt this resolution, there will be one more opportunity to vote on a plan before that portion of the plan would go
You will
into
have
effect.
to. You will have to.
Yep.
There's been a lot of questions that I've answered, I think, Mr. Todd, too. Why are we coming forth with at least, a plan that has a date? And I would just say I've answered that. For some people, it's kind of like saying, we come up with a school calendar every year, and we say we're gonna start school August, 23rd. But as we had been, a year and a half ago, we had to say, well, that's the start of school, it's gonna be a change. And so what we're saying right now is that we have a plan in place when, and this is working with other superintendents and other districts, I think everybody's saying there will hopefully be a point where we can go optional, mask recommended, what districts will call it, and we can get prepared for that. But conditions have to be right. And so just like whether we're starting school, whether we were circling a date, but again, conditions will have to be right. And this board and administration, we're gonna bring you the data, we'll keep you posted. And we'll work with you and we'll work with the community and use all data available to us to make sure that we're bringing you good information for which you can make the right kind of decision.
Dr. Marty, thank you for that reminder, because all of you do remember we had a plan to start in person, and we had a plan to be in person for a period of time. And I think it was Kevin a little while ago who said we had to pivot at one point in time. We did lots of pivoting. We have done lots of pivoting over the last 18 months because we do our best to present to you a plan as we are forward thinking, as we think about what is in the best interest of our kids and what we know at the time. But clearly, we don't hesitate to make a different recommendation if it truly is what's in the best interest of our students as we think about our mission. And over these past 18 and 19 months, in addition to thinking about our mission, we are thinking about the health and safety and well-being of all of our students and staff and community members.
Chelsea, a logistical question from a parent perspective of, since we have these thresholds by individual schools now, can you talk to us and tell us what will it look like if a school, okay, so say this goes into effect, say we get down the road where we are mask recommended, how will this work within the schools to know when a mask mandate, if you will, for lack of a better word, or mask required now has to go into effect? And how will that get communicated to that particular school community?
That is a great question, Debbie, and we are working on that. And so I mentioned Carter a little while ago. Carter works with Diane. Carter is the main person, is the only person that really who touches the dashboard. You know, he is the person who makes sure that those numbers are flowing correctly into some beautiful system that I'm sure he uses that I couldn't even tell you. If you want to know the details, Carter would have to tell you. But Carter makes sure that the data that is received from the school is pushed into the dashboard. And so currently, that data is pushed in and it is updated about 8 o'clock every morning, right, Carter? That will not be the case as we move forward. We will be in constant communication with the schools in regards to what's going on in the schools. We aren't going to have an automatic time because some things might be going on and we might need to, it might not need to be 8 o'clock. Somebody might have been doing a lot of contact tracing that night before, and things might be evolving, and so we will hold on updating that data until we believe as we start that school day, we have the best data that we can have as we move forward, and then look at that information to determine what we need to do. Our communications department is working on some templates, so we will have identified times for principals and nurses to communicate with families. If indeed the threshold is starting to creep up, we want people to be aware. If indeed we get to that threshold and we're getting to day 12 and we're doing well, we will communicate that hopefully on this date, masks can come off. So we are working on all of those details to be prepared if indeed this is where we are for second semester. And we will have that all outlined in early January, if not before. Because Paul's team is working pretty hard on that, and I know Dr. Beckner and Carter also have been working on that as well. The systems will be in place.
So as one of the 7 people that has the responsibility of making these votes, I think it's important that I make my intention abundantly clear to the community. I believe that we need to keep masks required, and I believe we need to keep masks required until our medical professionals, our public health data, our CDC guidelines indicate that it's safe to move to a mask optional environment. I believe we will get there eventually, but I believe it's important, my personal belief is that it's important that we continue to protect our communities and that we rely on the advice of medical and public health professionals to do so. So my vote yes tonight is a vote to keep a mask requirement in place through January 17th. And when we vote the week of January 10th, that's when I will vote based on science and data on what I think the mask situation should be beginning January 18th. The administration will make a recommendation and we'll make that vote. But I understand that I am in a place of privilege because I get to have one of the 7 votes. And you all don't know my heart, my mind, my stubbornness. So I just want to communicate that that is the perspective that I have on the issue. And that's mine, and I speak for myself.
Chelsea, can I ask you a question about the school positivity threshold? It says an outbreak of the school is defined as 2% more of the, or more of the student population. Are we accounting for staff in our buildings?
Not
The same-
with the 2% positivity threshold.
Can you talk us through that?
I'm gonna go back to that bullet. So, Carter, if you wanna dig a little deeper here, or share a little bit more, step right up and feel free. But no pressure. After Carter and Kevin analyzed the data, it's reasonable to conclude that 2% positivity threshold for a school to move forward or move to universal masking with a minimum of 8 students positive will provide the opportunity to stop the potential exponential spread of illness before we have to do anything else. With that, sorry, I'm gonna get to my right spot. Make sure I get it right. With that, and knowing that we believe about 88% of our staff is already currently vaccinated, when they did the analysis and included staff in the metric, it would make it less likely that an outbreak among our student population would result in a school reaching the threshold to return to universal masking if they included the staff in the metric. Carter, do you want to explain that in any other way?
Well
Okay.
Okay.
In other words, the more, in a real simple way, the more people you have in a group, the harder it would be to get
to the
2%.
threshold.
So,
Okay.
right.
And while we know 88% or approximately 80% of our staff, we don't have concrete numbers on our students because parents have not reported at the same percentage, at the same level.
Carter,
Right.
I don't think I have it, but didn't you all think about 35% of students? Is that the right number that I had in a note somewhere?
Hold up, I'll make one.
Carter, I know this is early. You're not going to charge us for this before the achievement report, are you?
Thank you.
I'm just kidding.
No, so I don't believe we have, again, I would ask Diane as well, but I don't believe we have a good metric on our student population in terms of vaccinated. What I do know is that when we contact trace students, as a result of exposure, that we ask those students whether or not they're vaccinated. And so we can look at some of those numbers to extrapolate what percentage of our student body is vaccinated. Now granted, our youngest students, under the ages of 12, would have just recently had the opportunity to be considered fully vaccinated. So really looking at 6th grade through 12th grade, the students who have for some time had the opportunity to be fully vaccinated, we're probably just over a third. But again, those are estimates based on some of the digging we've done into our contact tracing.
He didn't even have the notes and he had it in his brain. I found it, 33% secondary.
Carter, I want to just expand, since you're at the mic. As you watch the data, and you do every day, too, I think it was Mrs. Hopper that asked the question. You have a pretty good handle on what the trend lines are, right? You know, you basically are watching the numbers climb or decrease. So you have a pretty good idea that there's a school that may be heading, in this case, towards returning to mask.
We do, and amongst our leadership team, I know we share that information. I think you get sent an email every morning at 8 a.m. And so we pay close attention to each school, both in terms of number of quarantines that we're seeing. Obviously, that has an impact on the instructional progress in the school and who is and isn't in the building, but also the positivity rate in each school. And so that's something that Dr. Matheson and I know Diane and I are meeting about tomorrow, I think so. Just talking through, so the immediacy of knowing when students are positive, if we're approaching a threshold of 2%, and communicating that out to school officials, obviously leadership teams, but also our community is very important. And so we need to make sure each piece of the contact tracing of the test positivity, recording that data and getting it into our systems as accurate and as timely as we can to inform those sorts of decisions.
Thank you.
And I would also say that our building principals are on top of that all of the time. I mean, if I called a building principal and said, how many positive cases do you have? How many kids are out with positive? They wouldn't know. They're involved in those conversations. They're also making sure that kids have access to work and working with teachers to make sure all those things happen. So they are working and they know and they stay on top of that. Because a lot of it, and Diane will also be shaking her head, happens on the weekends. And so our principals and our nurses and our other contact tracers, assistant principals, spend quite a bit of time on their weekends contact tracing, because if we can stop a kid from coming to school on a Monday who might be symptomatic or might be a close contact, and based on our current process of modified quarantine shouldn't be at school, then that's what we want to do, is make sure we notify that family as soon as possible. So they are on top of that as well.
This is a really good lead-in to the question that I had. We've talked mostly about masks. I'm thinking now of the exclusion based on the communicable disease policy. And a question that I had was, among students who would be close contacts or staff members liable to transmit COVID-19. What does that mean? Well, is it a family contact? Is it you're living with someone who has COVID-19?
So that is an area that really has to be determined and identified through the contact tracing process. So the example that we have been using is if, maybe you have two people who are expressing their affection for one another, and maybe they kissed each other, and one was identified as positive, then we would want to really watch that other person, and we would ask that other person to go get tested so we can find out if indeed they are positive or not, because that would be an example of someone who we would identify as liable to transmit COVID-19 based on that close contact. That's just one example. But truly, that is going to be information that comes to light during the contact tracing process.
Anyone have any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much, Chelsea and Carter, for jumping in. I am going to read the resolution in its entirety before I ask for a motion. Do you want to?
Well, I just would say, Mr. Todd, just to clarify again, that the resolution is what you're approving tonight, but the pandemic response plan, including the specific amendments that Dr. Watson addressed, are part of the resolution. But again, you will review the pandemic plan within the next 30 days, obviously, as we've reinforced. But so again, the recommendation is for us to move forward with the resolution, and that will include what we were talking about with the pandemic plan here.
Okay. All right. So I will read this resolution, and I will try and do it in a reasonably short amount of time. So, titled, The Resolution of the Board of Education, Pandemic Response Plan 2021-2022, December 15th, 2021. Be it resolved by the Board of Education, hereinafter referred to as the Board, of the Parkway School District, hereinafter referred to as the district, St. Louis County, Missouri, as follows. Whereas the Governor of Missouri has issued various orders declaring a state of emergency pursuant to 44.100 relating to the COVID-19 pandemic, and whereas the district has a responsibility to ensure a safe and healthy learning environment for all students and staff and has undertaken certain mitigation efforts guided by recommendations from federal, state, and local health authorities, science and health experts, and data, all aimed at ensuring the continuation of in-person instruction for as many students as possible. And whereas the administration of the district has presented various strategies to the board regarding these mitigation efforts and has presented an updated pandemic response plan for the board's consideration and approval. And whereas local health authorities have recommended the continuation of mitigation strategies. And whereas the Missouri legislature has specifically given the board authority to manage and govern affairs at the local level, and that authority has not been diminished by any recent court rulings or legislative action. Also, the authority of the school districts to adopt COVID mitigation measures does not depend on any authority from the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services, DHSS, or any local health department. According to Missouri State Law 160.011 and 162.261, responsibility for the government and control of district affairs belongs solely to the Board of Education. Missouri State Law 171.011 also places the responsibility for making rules and regulations affecting the government of the school district with the Board of Education. Further, the Missouri Supreme Court has ruled that school boards can enforce reasonable rules to prevent disease in schools. State example, O'Bannon versus Cole, 119 SW 424, 429-30, Missouri 1909, and State Law 167.191. And district policy prohibits students from attending a public school where the district has a contagious disease and/or who are liable to transmit a contagious disease after exposure, and allows a public school to exclude such individuals from school until they are no longer contagious, and to require a medical examination to confirm the student is no longer contagious. Now therefore be it resolved, as a result of the authority established by the Missouri Legislature and the Missouri Supreme Court, the Parkway School District Board of Education hereby approves the recommendation of the superintendent to adopt the pandemic response plan submitted to the Board of Education for review and consideration on December 15th, 2021. The approved pandemic response plan shall be attached hereto. Unless modified, extended, or rescinded by the Parkway Board of Education, these strategies are effective for 30 days following their approval. Done by this order of the Board of Education, Parkway School District, St. Louis County, Missouri, this 15th day of December 2021. So having read that, may I have a motion and a second that the Board of Education adopt the resolution in the attached 2021-2022 pandemic response plan as amended this evening, December 15th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please, Nikki.
Ms. Davis?
Yes.
Ms. Hill?
Yes.
Mrs. Hopper?
Yes.
Mr. Schindler?
Yes.
Dr. Ciartino?
Yes.
Mr. Seltzer?
Yes.
Mr. Todd?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Next up, we have no policy review tonight, but we do have the previously mentioned achievement report. So we will bring Carter Snow, our coordinator of assessment, back to the podium to walk us through that.
Good evening, President Todd, Vice President Hopper, members of the board, Dr. Marty, and Mrs. Stover. It's my pleasure to present to you the 2021 Annual Achievement Report. So under the fifth cycle of the Missouri School Improvement Plan, our progress is measured according to 5 standards. Those standards are student achievement, group achievement, college and career readiness, attendance, and graduation rate. You also will see that those are related to our measurable objectives according to Project Parkway Strategic Plan. If you've been to any meeting with Dr. Beckner in the past 3 years, he's probably quizzed you on these. He quizzes all of us on these. It's not multiple choice, and there are 6 of them. We also know that some of these standards are very hard to measure with your state or national test scores. Things like being kind, as we saw students here recognized for their kindness, setting and adjusting goals, asking and pursuing meaningful questions. Primarily, the focus of tonight's report will be meeting or demonstrating growth towards state and local academic benchmarks in all curriculum areas, specifically tonight in math, ELA, science, and social studies. We also know that consistency in the tools we use to monitor progress as a district and as schools is important, and the state assessment system has been anything but consistent. Our state standards have changed a number of times, including in 2018. We've had multiple assessments that haven't been included into the report as a result of concerns of reliability. And then we've also had needed field tests for new exams over the course of the past few years. So it does make it difficult to compare one year's performance to the next. I should highlight, obviously, that in the 2019-2020 school year, the state test was canceled due to COVID. And last year, our participation rate for our state test, primarily our MAP and EOCs, was lower. That was due to not a virtual option for our students to take the test at home, and so we communicated with parents, asked them about their availability to bring their children in to test in person, and some of them chose out of health and safety concerns not to do so. So we had about 1,000 fewer students test last year than we would have had in a typical year. So this is directly from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. Just a caveat as we talk about any of these results tonight around state assessment. I think the word I used quite frequently in the report to you was incautious. I'll just say these data cannot and should not be interpreted the same way as previous years, and blanket comparisons to previous years is not recommended. In fact, the State Board of Education in December of 2020 voted to suspend MAP data for accountability purposes, both federal and state. So while we're looking at some of these metrics around state assessment, they were not used for school or district accountability. And before we dive into the results, I thought it'd be helpful to take a trip down memory lane and think of what happened last year. I know you've made a number of decisions since then. And so just as a reminder, we started the school year in virtual learning for all of our students. At the very end of October and early November, we returned to a hybrid model for some of our students, where they were in the building some days and learning virtually others. And some students at that time chose to attend virtual campus. About 1/3 of our school population chose to do so. In January, we returned at the end of second quarter to in-person for 4 days for students and families who chose that, and continued on with virtual campus, again, about 1/3 of our student population. And then in May, we conducted MAP testing, where the primary focus was meeting state participation guidelines, which really meant for many of our schools condensing testing. We knew that we needed to use every minute of the calendar day focusing on instruction, and the trade-off between instruction and giving an assessment was one that we leaned more towards on, let's get some instructional days back. So while we did participate in the state test last year, our primary goal was participation, not necessarily drawing that out over a long period like we might typically do to achieve a maximum score. So how did our students fare this past year? I think, Mr. Seltzer, you asked me in this stage last year if I had my crystal ball, where would we be when I'm presenting this report this year? And I thought there might be a measurable impact, and we'll see some of that tonight. I should note that academic achievement is only one aspect of a student's experience in Parkway. These results will be insufficient to show the incredible resilience and adaptability our students, families, and staff have shown over the past 2 years. And truly, if we think about our mission of an ever-changing world, we have been living that. So let's dive into the results after some key terms. I mentioned MSIP 5, that's the 5th cycle of the Missouri School Improvement Plan. This is the last time I'll present on it because we are moving towards MSIP 6, which has needed improvements to measure both performance and, importantly, growth for students, as we'll continue the focus on not only high performance, but students that are truly growing. I'll also use a metric called MPI, which is the MAP Performance Index. Every year I say it, and I think it's just ingrained into me now, but it's the number of students advanced times 500, the number of students proficient times 400, the number of students basic times 300, and the number of students below basic times 100. You divide that by the number of students that took the test, and you get a metric called MPI, which is the MAP Performance Index. And then finally, and I think we're finally going to get rid of this language, but the student gap group, we're going to move towards student groups. These are students who have not historically performed at the same level of their peers in Parkway and nationally. And so we do look at performance of these groups specifically to know, are we closing persistent achievement gaps? And so those are students that are Black, Hispanic, students with an IEP, students receiving free and reduced lunch, and students learning English. So achievement. In 2021, you can see the metric of the Parkway performance compared to the state performance. I know your mind wants to draw a line from 2019 through 2020 to 2021. Again, I would caution against it, as we would not like to compare those scores directly to other years. But again, the Parkway MPI on MAP assessment and ELA remain well above the state average. In math, again, the Parkway average remained above the state average, but what we know about from our local assessments as well as national studies is the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on mathematic performance has been more measurable, or the magnitude has been greater. And so that's something we're looking very, very closely at. On social studies performance, which is primarily the government end of course exams, the Parkway performance was just above the state performance. I may make one asterisk here, which is our government courses are typically a semester long. If we think back to how we did high school last year, we actually did quarters. And so many students finished government in quarter 1 or quarter 2, where our schools were not open for testing yet. And so we assessed them at the end of the school year. So it might have been many months since they had completed that course to when they took the government end of course exam. In fact, we continue to assess some of those seniors that may have missed that exam to meet a participation rate this year. And so not ideal circumstances for assessment, but just do know that there might have been a lag between when the students finished the course and when they took the exam. And then finally, science, which is assessed in 5th grade, in 8th grade, and in high school biology. You'll note the gap in score from 2018. That's when a new assessment was being field tested. And then a delay in scores. We just more recently got the 2019 scores back as well as the 2021. So standard 2 on MSIP 5 is about group achievement. The following slides, you'll observe what continues to be an observable gap in achievement between students in the GAP group and all Parkway students. We are keenly aware that the health, income, and achievement impacts of the pandemic have been most acute for our most marginalized students and their families. As we strive toward meeting mission, we'll remain vigilant to the challenges and opportunities when closing these gaps. Maybe more simply said, we've all been in the same ocean in this pandemic, but some of us have been in different boats. We continue to see that difference in achievement for some of our most marginalized students. This graph in ELA shows the difference in performance for all Parkway students in orange, and students we classify and the state classifies is in the GAP group in blue. So the difference between those two circles is our measurable achievement gap throughout the last 5 years. The gap remains measurable and observable in math, in social studies on the government EOC, as well as science. Standard 3 is related to college and career readiness. In other words, how well are we preparing for students after Parkway? And like all of these and many of the reports you saw in the PDF, there's an asterisk on this one. And so we always monitor very closely our average ACT score. And you may be looking at our Parkway average in that trend line from 2020 to 2021 and thinking, yes, we've really knocked it out of the park this year. I would issue one caution where we had about 781 students take the ACT for the graduating class of 2021, whereas in a typical year, about 1,300 students take it. And so if you think to our assessment plan, we typically assess juniors, all juniors on the ACT for the class of 2021. That would have been in April of 2020. And so obviously that's immediately when we started responding to the pandemic and had to shut down school. We also know that many colleges and universities waive the requirement for this exam in order for admittance. They knew that testing centers were closed. It was going to be very difficult for students to have the opportunity to take the test. And so while about 780 of our students did take the test, many of them did not, which may account for the somewhat dramatic increase in score. On our advanced placement exams, we continue to see very high number of our students taking these AP exams. For seniors, they may have taken this virtually at home their junior year. For last year's seniors, it was administered in person and with a virtual option last year as well. So we had about 1,159 students take AP exams in the 2021 school year. That is a slight drop from previous years. But we're maintaining a very high average score with 79% of our students, of our exam scores being over a 3, which typically confer college and university credit for that subject area. The fourth standard for MSIP 5 is all about attendance. And so this is a measure of the percent of students achieving a 90% or greater achievement rate. You will see for the first time since I've been doing this presentation, the percentage of students attending 90% of the time dropped to 87% last year. I will note that quarantines were counted against our attendance rate last year, and there were no fewer than 3 ways we calculated attendance last school year, whether or not the students were virtual, in a hybrid model, or when they returned. And so the attendance calculation was complex and varied throughout the year. I give a lot of credit to our core data folks who are making sure that was accurate and reporting it to the state, but obviously we did see a drop in attendance, which I know, Mr. Todd, you asked last year about this trend line kind of slowly trending down. Still working with partner districts to try to identify some root causes for that, but obviously 2021 graduates was primarily, and all students was pandemic related. We are looking at how we may reclassify this in the sixth cycle of our Missouri School Improvement Plan. And finally, our graduation rate. The state does use the best of the 4, 5, or 6-year rate. I will show you the 4 here tonight, which was 92.3% of our class of 2021 graduating in 4 years, which, considering the challenges that this class has gone through with their junior year being severely interrupted and their senior year dealing with the pandemic, is still above the state average. So I know I've just thrown a lot of data at you. I know you've had some of these metrics for a few weeks, and I also know that you may have some questions. And so with that, I will end my presentation and open the floor for any questions you might have.
Excuse me, Carter, you don't have the data on the 5 students who did graduate in 4, but maybe needed more time?
I do, yeah, let me go ahead and pull that up. So our 5-year rate for graduation was actually 96.4 in 2021, which the previous year was 96.9. And so those students who may have been seniors 2 years ago, the first class that was impacted by the pandemic went on and graduated on time at a rate that's very comparable to previous years.
I just want to, I think we're really seeing that we want to continually understand that for some students, whether it's illness or whatever issues might be, that we're going to honor that ongoing effort to get them through a high school graduation.
Absolutely, yeah. I know our schools and our counselors and our administrators continue to work with students all the way until technically they would age out at 21.
This is more of a comment than a question. I am very happy to hear that MSIP 6 is going to be including student growth in addition to achievement, because we all know students don't start in the same place and they don't end in the same place, but if they grow, that means something. I'll be curious to see how else it changes, because assessment is a complicated thing and it's not always reflective of what students are learning. And I think including growth in addition to achievement is really important.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Hill. I might add that not only are we looking at demonstrating growth and advocating for growth in MSIP 6 over the course of a year, we're also advocating through course assessment so we can see beginning, middle, and end of year growth. We think that's very important. One, our teachers are working incredibly hard, and when we can show them that their hard work is demonstrating continued student growth, regardless of achievement, I think that that's some of the wins they may need right now. But also for students who are working that so hard to know that they're learning and they're growing and they can see that happen throughout the year is additionally motivating.
Mrs. Hill, I'd just like to note that Carter and Kevin are among other local leaders in the area that are really very active in new assessments, MSEP 6 changes. So thanks for bringing that up. I agree with you, and we are leaning on the commissioner to get moving. That's been talked about. I was on an M6 committee probably 5 years ago now, and that work really needs to get moved forward. Now, the pandemic obviously was a barrier, but it's time to move that forward.
And it goes without saying we appreciate Dr. Marty's advocacy on our behalf too.
Thank you.
Anyone have any further questions?
Did you say, Carter, that we will eventually have, or you will eventually have comparison data to other districts so we can see if our 2021 pattern mirrors what other districts saw?
We're primarily partnering with other districts looking at attendance. Some of the challenges with comparing other districts for the 2021 MAP data specifically is participation rates varied widely throughout the state. And so if you were a school district like St. Louis Public, who's primarily virtual, the participation rate was significantly lower. Schools to our west that had primarily more in-person students, participation rate was higher. And so MAP testing is known as census testing. We try to assess every student in our building to make sure it's an accurate reflection of our schools and how we're doing. And last year that was a challenge. But I will say that we have a little group of assessment coordinators, so people like me, who meet every Tuesday, actually, to discuss achievement in Rockwood and Lindbergh and Wentzville. And so we started that in the pandemic to kind of, I don't know, be a shoulder to cry on maybe, and learn from one another, but we've continued that. And that's been meaningful work as we kind of share and cooperate with other districts.
Carter, I just have a question. The 87% attendance, which I believe was remarkable, actually, given the challenges we had. To Christie's point, Mrs. Davis' point, is that as you think about other districts, that's pretty darn good, isn't it? Because I've heard superintendents talk about attendance rates in the mid to low 80s in some cases.
Yeah, it is exceptional, and we know that the attendance rate calculation changed again for this year to account for students who are out for the need of quarantine for public and school safety, and so that will be reflected in the new numbers. But yeah, the 87% is a result of a lot of hard work of getting people to school to ensure that students who are learning virtually are attending, and that work continues, for sure.
Well, thank you very much. We definitely appreciate the information. We've been looking at it the past few days since we got the report, and we know last year presented some challenges, but hopefully we're on the right track.
Thank you.
So, thank you. We have no work session. We have no special meeting tonight, so may I have a motion and a second to adjourn the regular meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you all for attending and/or watching